Alright. Hello everyone. It's been quite a while since my last stream, and today I'm not streaming, I'm recording a video, because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine war. I know there's been a lot of content floating around on YouTube about it, from people with varying viewpoints, some good, some bad. In particular, I am more partial to things that uh, somebody like Vosh might have to say, although people like Hassan also have very valuable viewpoints, and I wanted to give my take because I don't think my opinion has been 100% represented by anybody I'm watching. Uh, and I figured I would just sort of go off the cuff because I felt the idea being relatively coherent in my head, in the headspace where I'm at right now. So let me start with the endpoints of what I think happens. Right. While I do think that the calls for de-escalation and diplomacy are ultimately the best thing that we can do right now, there are only two possible endings to this. So ending number one is that Putin takes an absolute loss. You know, pulls out of Ukraine. PR disaster. Russia collapses. That's ending number one. Ending number two is World War III. Uh, I know I'm not, obviously I don't have any sort of qualifications to my name to back up those arguments, but I'm going to try to explain my reasoning. So, Putin is crazy, but that's not a product of his mental state alone. I think what's been going on is that in the year 2000, going way back, Putin was installed, elected, but more so installed into power by the Russian oligarchs to protect their interests. And that's where you get this sort of system of the political opponents disappearing because Putin is like the oligarch favorite. He is the strong man, and he started, working on his own to disappear his political opponents to keep that system in line until eventually it snowballed to the point where basically Putin was the only force in Russia holding it all together. And also, increasingly, Putin has been surrounding himself with yes men, people who will just sort of go along with what he wants and say yes sir, yes sir. However, this being a product of wiping out political opponents, the logical conclusion of that is that Putin no longer is getting a reliable account of events that are unfolding on the world stage, because everybody's too afraid to tell him no or say, well, that's not actually correct. See, this is what's happening here. And this is what we need to do. We're not in a good spot. He doesn't want to hear any of that. Or rather, there's a fine line between that and you, like, disagreeing with Putin politically in his eyes. And so that is grounds for, like, removal from your post or removal from the mortal plane in Russia. And so when this is compounded with Russia's propaganda machine, which is highly competent, highly effective, we've now entered a situation where Putin has bought into the propaganda that he himself has been producing. The RT narrative, all the Russian state media, all that. Putin has sort of fallen into that trap on his own, kind of detaching himself from reality because reality is like Western propaganda or whatever, which obviously there is such a thing as Western propaganda. We have to deal with it every day, but there's obviously a method to be found within the madness. Um, and so, as a result of this propaganda machine and this cycle of deposing anybody who disagrees with you, turning into deposing anybody who tells you no, so that you're surrounded by people who will only say yes, Putin wants Ukraine. Putin, I think, has always wanted Ukraine. He's used it as part of the former Soviet bloc. He's said several times that his intentions are to rebuild the old Soviet or even just the Russian Empire, with its 1914 borders, which would necessitate a lot of expansion. He already has built a geopolitical sphere that includes a lot of the older Soviet bloc states, including Belarus, right next to Ukraine. but Ukraine was consistently not, uh, or semi-consistently, like not in that same block of interests. So, I think we're all pretty familiar with the situation leading up to the invasion that led to Putin invading. He had the plan for a one-day blitzkrieg, which failed miserably, and so now we're a couple weeks into a ground invasion with horrible logistics and shit like that. And Putin has been taking optical L's left and right. Massive protests in Russia, which, my heart pours out for the protesters there. I wish I could show some sort of solidarity, but I've got a lot of shit on my mind. Um, and not only that, but the Russian logistics on the ground are incredibly shaky to the degree that Russia has now been completely shut out just about from the world economy, and they're about to lose their one gigantic foothold in the European uh, economic sphere, which is their oil production. It looks like European countries are going to start transitioning away from uh, fossil fuels that they need to rely on Russia for. And in the intermediary, that means shifting to Norway to get some of their supply of oil. And Putin is getting increasingly desperate. And so in his mind, there's either win or loss. And he's been operating in such a way that any concession to him, he will be able to spin as a W, because that's how powerful the Russian propaganda machine is, especially within Russia, where they don't hardly get anything else. But even outside of Russia, there are quite a few Americans and, Western Europeans, people outside of the Russian bloc who buy into Russian propaganda. Um, so Russia has to experience a defeat so total and unambiguous, I think, that Putin couldn't possibly construe it as some sort of win for him. Otherwise, this is just going to continue to happen. He's not going to stop with Ukraine. It doesn't matter what, in any scenario where Putin gets something that he wants, he's going to continue pushing. He's not exactly shy about this. He's used the threat of nuclear war a few times recently, um, because he's a despot, and he knows that the Western Bloc wouldn't act first. Regardless of how altruistic or not those intentions are, which they're not altruistic, the West is not going to be the one to launch the first nuclear missile, and Putin is exploiting that to his advantage. Uh, Once he takes Ukraine, which he very well might, it's gonna get harder for him the more he pushes in, and the less he's able to like encircle Ukrainian troops. But anyways, I'm sort of rambling a little bit. Even if he doesn't take the whole Ukraine, or the whole of Ukraine, excuse me, he's gonna try to push for more. If he gets anything, if he gets Donetsk and Lugansk, he's gonna push further. If he gets Donetsk, Lugansk, and the was it Zaporozhye, that oblast that connects Crimea to the rest of the Azov Sea area. If he gets that, he's going to push further. Uh, be it 5, 10 years. This is just, we're gonna be right back where we started. Same thing that he did with Georgia. Same thing that he did with well, I guess he didn't directly do this with Belarus, but this is kind of his model. Um, and so that's the scenario where World War III breaks out, because he's not going to stop even when he reaches the borders of the EU and NATO. His demands are outlandish. He wants NATO to uh, eject several member states that would just be subsumed right into Putin's image of the Russian Empire. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, um, even Poland in some of the more outlandish interpretations I've seen. I don't know if he's actually made any demands like that. Um, but in my mind, it's only a matter of time before this turns into the world being at war with the Russian bloc or the Russo-Chinese bloc, depending on which side China's government decides to take. Unless this is a pretty big unless, Putin takes basically the fattest geopolitical L of all time. We're talking like Hitler in the bunker kind of L, that big. Um, he needs to be hit where it hurts. The U.S. and the EU can't pull any punches on sanctions. We can't pull any punches on equipment that we are willing to send to them. The fact that we for some reason have decided that sending them jets is too much is just seems arbitrary to me. Um, it like I get that like on one level is like, oh, that would be perceived as an act of war. Putin has committed innumerable acts of war. It's only so long, if he keeps doing this until somebody has to respond in kind, more or less. And of course, we have been sending weapons. Not troops, but weapons. A jet is just a weapon by any other name, right? A lot of the weapons that we've been sending them are NATO marked, or like NATO standard equipment, and he's not getting in a fuss about that. Uh, so ultimately, I know this might sound condescending and Western chauvinist, but Putin really needs to be put in his place. This is the 21st century, and I think we've found out thus far that military and administrative empire does not work anymore. The model that the United States attempted to do with Iraq and Afghanistan, the model that was so prevalent in the 20th century with colonial empires, is obsolete. It just doesn't work. And the name of the game now is economics. And I think Putin or the Russian powers that be have to be made to understand that, because everybody's got to be, playing this game where even though economic empire is still horrible and results in the exploitation of billions of people in Africa, in South Asia, etc., it's not boots on the ground war horrible. And it's sort of one step closer to us being able to upend the economic relations. Is that the whole world has to be focused on economic relations for us to direct the discourse there and upend them and depose the bourgeois. Me being a socialist, full disclosure. But to do that, Putin has to take the ultimate defeat, and there can be no in between there, because there is no in between in his mind. Anything short of that will be a win, because he will have gotten some sort of concession from the West, and we can't let that happen. But I feel I'm increasingly repeating myself, so I'll end the video there. And now I guess you know my take.